mode.
Hi, this is Anna Martin, and I am Council Technical Staff. I am the lead on Coral Amendment 8, and so I'm here to review the actions and alternatives in this amendment with you. So this slide describes the overall process for development of management measures. The Council first receives recommendations from the advisory panel and also through public input, and they also receive scientific information from the Scientific and Statistical Committee, the SSC, and also through the stock assessment process, which is CDAR. Recommendations are also received from Council staff. So the Council develops the fishery management plans and the amendments to each fishery management plan and approves them for secretarial review. Finally, the Secretary of Commerce has delegated review, approval, or disapproval of the amendments to the National Marine Fisheries Service. And so final review and implementation proceeds accordingly. This slide shows a snapshot of the timing for Coral Amendment 8. So the process for this amendment first started during the Coral Advisory Panel meeting in October of 2011, so it has been under development for a little bit of time. Coral scientists serving on the advisory panel and representatives from NOAA's Deep Sea Coral Research and Technology Program presented research to the Coral Advisory Panel that identified deepwater coral resources in areas outside of the existing coral habitat areas of particular concern boundaries. The Coral AP approved a suite of recommendations for the Council's consideration, and that was to consider expanding some of these coral protected areas to incorporate some of these newly discovered deepwater coral observations. The Council reviewed the Coral AP recommendations at their December meeting in 2011 and approved the measures for public scoping at that time. So the scoping meetings were held to scope these issues and to gather initial public input, so to provide some initial guidance to the Council during their deliberations at their March Council meeting. So the public scoping meetings were held in January and February of 2012. We've had a number of advisory panel meetings to discuss this developing amendment. The Shrimp and Deepwater Shrimp APs met in April of 2012. The Habitat AP and the Coral AP met in May of 2012, and the SSC has reviewed the amendment during a past couple of their meetings. We also held a joint meeting of the Deepwater Shrimp and the Coral Advisory Panels with representatives from the Law Enforcement Advisory Panel and the Habitat Advisory Panel in October of last year. The Coral and Habitat APs met again in May of this year, and the Deepwater Shrimp AP also met in May this year. So the Council reviewed all of this advisory panel input at their June meeting in 2013. They selected preferred alternatives at that time and approved Coral Amendment 8 for public hearings. So these are meetings. The public hearings will be held the second week of August in a number of venues throughout the South Atlantic. A comment period is currently open until August the 18th, and the Council is scheduled to take final action and approve this amendment for secretarial review at their September meeting. Okay, we would like to get into some of the specifics here. Coral Amendment 8 is proposing to expand the boundaries of the Oculina Bank habitat area of particular concern, the Stetson-Miami Terrace Coral HAPC, and also the Cape Lookout Coral HAPC. This amendment is also considering implementation of a transit provision through the Oculina Bank HAPC. And so we are going to walk through the actions and specific alternatives with you now. Action 1 expands the boundaries of the Oculina Bank HAPC, and the slides following this one show the maps that interpret the language of the alternatives here, so we'll get to that next. We have Alternative 1, which is the no action alternative. Alternative 2 modifies the northern boundary of the current Oculina Bank HAPC, and the two sub-alternatives under Alternative 2 modify a northern boundary extension of the Oculina Bank. 2A modifies the northern boundary following closely the 70 and 100 meter depth contour lines respectively, while annexing hard bottom features. So under Alternative 2A, 329 square miles would be added to the existing Oculina Bank HAPC. Subalternative 2B is one of the Council's preferred. The western boundary in the proposed northern extension under this alternative follows closely to the 70-meter contour while annexing hard bottom features, and replaces two coordinates in the southern portion of the boundary from what is identified in subalternative 2A in order to reduce rock shrimp fishing traps that are impacted here. So the east boundary of a northern extension shifts west, again from what is identified in 2A, in order to further reduce the rock shrimp tracks in the area. So under subalternative 2B, approximately 260 square miles would be added to the Oculina Bank HAPC. This shows you two different maps depicting subalternative 2A. So you can see the map on the left indicates the areas of mapped habitat, and this is where the discoveries of coral habitat were made by the coral AP scientists. These are areas off of Titusville and Daytona in Florida. The map on the right shows you the vessel monitoring system concentration of points. This is VMS data from the rock shrimp fishery, and this fishery is required to carry and operate VMS, and as a result, fishery managers know where the fishery is operating. So I'll get to the percentages associated with the VMS data momentarily. This slide shows you two different map depictions of subalternative 2B. Again, this is under Action 1. This is the Council's preferred for a northern extension of the Oculina Bank. You can see, again, the map on the left indicates the areas of mapped habitat, and the map on the right, again, showing the VMS points concentrated in proposed subalternative 2B. Shifting to the proposed western extension of the Oculina Bank HAPC, this is Alternative 3 under Action 1, and it's also a preferred alternative of the Council. The blue polygon in the map on your right shows you the area of proposed modification for the western boundary of the Oculina Bank, and this lies primarily between the two existing satellite sites and tracks a little further south from the current satellite site of the Oculina Bank. This slide represents the fishing that is associated with the Action 1 alternatives as it relates to the VMS points within each alternative scenario. So if you look at the last row in each grouping associated with an alternative, this will tell you the percentage of rock shrimp fishing points that are within each alternative. Rock shrimp fishing here has been defined as those vessels traveling 2 to 4 knots. And if you look at subalternative 2A under Action 1, for the entire time series of VMS points, and this series being points from 2003 to 2013, 5.5% of rock shrimp fishing points lie within this proposed northern extension identified in subalternative 2A. For preferred subalternative 2B, for the entire time series of VMS points, 4.2% of rock shrimp fishing points lie within this proposed northern extension. And for preferred alternative 3, for the entire time series of points, 0.8% of rock shrimp fishing points lie within a proposed western extension of the Oculina Bank. If you look at the summary of effects under Action 1, there is a greater biological benefit to the coral resources in all of the alternative areas than what's identified under the no action alternative. The alternatives to expand Oculina Bank do not impact dolphin and wahoo and coastal migratory pelagic species because those gear types would still be permitted within the HAPC. So there would be no restriction to those fisheries here. The impacts on the snapper grouper fishery would be minimal and would only occur if anchoring is taking place. For snapper grouper species, impacts would be greater under Subalternative 2A than preferred Subalternative 2B. And the reduction in rock shrimp landings and the X-vessel value would be greater under Subalternative 2A than preferred Alternative 2B. Now, X-vessel value is the dollar amount that a vessel loses as a result of the reduction in landings. So in this case, rock shrimp landings and the reduction is associated with an expansion of the Oculina Bank HAPC. Moving on to Action 2, this would implement a transit provision through the Oculina Bank, and this is important because of the size of the northern extension of Oculina that is proposed under Action 1. Because of the large swath of area identified in the alternatives for Action 1, the Council is considering a transit provision to allow rock shrimpers access to traditional grounds off the eastern boundary. So currently, vessels are not allowed to possess rock shrimp on board while within the HAPC, and this action would modify that specific provision. Alternative 2 requires a minimum speed while in transit, and vessels must stow gear according to stowage requirements currently in place for the marine protected areas, which set forth that a trawl net may remain on deck, but trawl doors must be disconnected from nets and must be secured. So under preferred Alternative 3, a minimum speed of no less than 5 knots is also stipulated. It also requires an increase in ping rate. So right now the rock shrimp vessels are pinging hourly, and under preferred Alternative 3 that would be increased to every 5 minutes while within the HAPC. And gear is defined as stowed with doors and nets out of the water. So that is a difference from Alternative 2. Summary of effects for Action 2. Again, the intention of the alternatives is to lessen the economic impact on the rock shrimp fleet based on the measures identified in Action 1. Both alternatives under Action 2 would require a minimum speed rate while in transit. Preferred Alternative 3 requires a VMS unit capable of increasing a ping rate while in transit. So of the 79 vessels that are in use in the rock shrimp fleet, at least 22 of them are older units that would need to be upgraded under preferred Alternative 3. The fishermen would incur the cost associated with such an upgrade, and the vessels would not be eligible for reimbursement funds. And the economic impacts associated with preferred Alternative 3 are anticipated that they would be offset by fuel cost savings, an increase in the amount of time fishing, and allowance of rock shrimp on board while within the Oculina Bank HAPC. Moving on to Action 3. This action is modifying the western boundary of the Stetson-Miami Terrace coral habitat area of particular concern to incorporate a shallow water Lophelia ecosystem discovered by Coral Advisory Panel scientists. So here we are moving further offshore, and the impacts associated with this action pertain to the royal red shrimp fishery. So we are in deeper waters here. Alternative 2 modifies the southern southeast boundary of the coral HAPC in a manner that releases the flat bottom region while maintaining protection of coral habitat. This alternative adds 490 square miles to the existing area, and this was developed jointly by the Coral Habitat and Deepwater Shrimp APs. Alternative 3 modifies the Coral AP's original recommendation that was taken out for public scoping. So this alternative includes the area of mapped habitat and excludes areas of royal red fishery activity based on the VMS data. So this alternative would add 653 square miles to the existing Coral HAPC. Under Preferred Alternative 4, this is similar to Alternative 2 in scale, but with the inclusion of a shrimp fishery access area, which would be used as a gear, haulback, and drift zone. This was developed during the Deepwater Shrimp Advisory Panel meeting in May of 2013, and like Alternative 2, this alternative would add 490 square miles to the existing HAPC. So Alternative 2 on the left shows you the area of mapped habitat in the southeastern corner, and Alternative 3 is depicted on your right. Preferred Alternative 4 is listed here, and you can see the shaded area in the corner is the shrimp fishery access area. This slide indicates fishing associated with the Action 3 alternatives as it relates to the VMS points within each alternative. And as with before, if you look at the last row in each grouping here associated with an alternative, this tells you the percentage of royal red shrimp fishing points that are in with each alternative scenario. Royal red fishing has been defined as those vessels traveling 2 to 4 knots. And so if you look at Alternative 2 under Action 1, for the entire time series of the VMS data, 0.7% of royal red fishing points lie within this proposed northern extension. For Alternative 3, for the entire time series of VMS points, 0.1% of royal red fishing points lie within this proposed extension. And for Preferred Alternative 4, for the entire time series of VMS points, 0.1% of royal red fishing points lie within this proposed extension. The summary of effects for Action 3. There is greater biological impacts to deepwater coral habitat under all of the action alternatives than there is under the no action alternative. Preferred Alternative 4, again, is very similar to Alternative 2, but it does provide royal red shrimp fishermen with a zone with which to haul back their gear without drifting into the Coral HAPC, where gear is currently prohibited. So as a result, the VMS points are cut out of this area. Alternatives 2 and 3 would result in minor loss of ex-vessel value based on the reduction in royal red shrimp landings. And Preferred Alternative 4 would not have direct economic impacts. The last action in the amendment is Action 4, and this would expand the boundaries of the Cape Lookout Coral HAPC. And here this would be, the intentions are to incorporate a newly discovered area of Lophelia habitat north of the Coral HAPC. You can see in the map to your right, the inset box there indicates the high relief bathymetry. So Alternative 1, again, is the no action alternative, and Preferred Alternative 2 would extend the northern boundary by approximately 10 square miles. No VMS activity in the Cape Lookout Coral HAPC proposed expansion occurs, and this Coral HAPC does appear to be the northernmost deepwater coral habitat on the southeastern U.S. slope. Again, it's in federal waters off of Wilmington, North Carolina. And this slide indicates what the public can do. We have an open comment period until 5 p.m. on August the 18th. We are accepting electronic and mail-in comments at the address listed there. And we do have a lot of additional information associated with Coral Amendment 8, and that is located on our website. under the public hearings section of the website. We have a series of upcoming public hearings in a number of venues that are indicated here on the slide. The public hearings are an opportunity for the public to interact with council technical staff as well as council members that participate in coordinating all of these hearings. They are held from 4 to 7 p.m. and formal public comments are accepted on the record at each of these locations. And lastly, if you have any questions regarding Coral Amendment 8, you can contact me. Again, I'm Anna Martin, and our contact information is listed there. If you have general questions regarding the process for these amendments, you may contact Kim Iverson, our Public Information Officer, or Amber Von Harden, our Fishery Outreach Specialist.